We took that out because we were hearing that politically it didn't seem very palatable to do so, but it's a conversation that we're starting to hear again, so we may want to revisit putting that back into the platform in whatever capacity we deem appropriate moving forward, so they know where we stand on that issue. You see the WY after that, that's for Wyoming. There are some states who have recently done transportation funding reform, however you want to call it. This is something Wyoming did and passed it overwhelmingly, was increase their motor fuel tax and index it to inflation. So that's one of the states, and what they did will be looked at. Provide for a local motor fuel excise tax. We've had that discussion in the past as well. It's formally been in our platform. It's another one that we may want to look at putting back in there. That's something that Florida has done. Many of their counties, they have that, and so that's why you see the FL next to it. Multi-jurisdictional Splice, we currently have a voluntary regionalism platform position, and multi-jurisdictional Splice is a more appropriate term, I believe, for what it is we're trying to accomplish there. And that
they're going to take the place of the T-Splice, the name change.
Not take the place of. T-Splice is a separate deal. We want to make sure that's clear.
Included in here anyway. T-Splice.
Our platform does have T-Splice in there, and we're going to go through the platform at the end real briefly, and that is actually the first provision that we have in our platform. So there's still T-Splice still there. Multi-jurisdictional Splice is the idea of allowing 2 or more local governments to come together on a project and levy up to 1 cent to fund that project. There was a bill, House Bill 195, sponsored by Representative Ed Sussler from Cobb County, that was in during the last biennial. It had 1 hearing. We've talked about it in this committee before briefly. We've talked about it for the policy committee as well. And that's this kind of concept. And we have a platform position on it, like I said, is voluntary regionalism that kind of speaks to our ideal from a county standpoint. But that's something that will be a part of this conversation as well. Railroad, diesel surcharge, airline fuel charges, I've mentioned briefly, kind of look at those and bring those revenues back to where they're being derived from, and helping out local airports, things of that nature. And lastly, wholesale motor fuel tax. Pennsylvania's done that recently, something to look at where you increase the tax at the wholesale level. My understanding is we have one already. And Sully, do you know is there anything you want to add about the wholesale? Do you know much about that or what Pennsylvania's done versus us? You want to throw anything out there for now on it?
It's really shifting, as I understand it, from the retail side to the wholesale side.
That's right. And that's, so that is right, I do remember that. They took it off the retail side, put it on the wholesale side, and I think from Pennsylvania's standpoint, what they saw is if you assume that full tax got passed on to the consumer, the equivalent of being on the retail side, a commuter traveling 12,000 miles a year, which is kind of the average right now of what they say in most cases, would add $2 a week to their cost, is what it translated to, with an average MPG vehicle. So that's something they looked at. That's some of the data they have. It generated a good amount of revenue for Pennsylvania. So that's one of the conversations that we anticipate having as well. Any questions regarding the study committee? I know it's pie in the sky. That's the reason for that is to kind of wet your whistle a little bit, because as we get towards the end, the good chairman here is going to ask for volunteers to be a part of that study committee, and we're going to want your help. And hopefully we've got you interested in at least having that conversation. Any questions before I move on to the next item?
Shaun, have you done any estimates as to what each of these will generate?
That is being worked on. So my hope is to have some of those numbers, whatever we can have, by the study committee, where we plan to really try to dig into that a little bit more, and because I know that'll go a long way towards determining the cost benefit of each of these issues, each of these options.
Shaun?
Yes, sir.
Has there been any discussion or serious work on what kind of infrastructure we needed to shift over to a miles driven tax rather than based on the consumption of gasoline, since so many cars are getting better fuel efficiency and all that?
I know that conversation has been, I know that talk has been had. It's something that's been put out there. It's going to go back to the political appetite of the General Assembly and the constituents of Georgia, and because in order to do miles driven, you're going to have to deal with GPS in the vehicles, things of that nature, and you have privacy rights concerns. I believe it was Oregon who did a pilot study on that and used some things there. So, I mean, it's definitely, like I said, everything's on the table to have the conversation early on. a lot of organizations, a lot of stakeholders doing a fair amount of research on all these various issues from different states and trying to compare the makeup of the states to Georgia to see where our needs are and what may be of best fit. So I mean, it's definitely something that's on the radar.
I hope it stays on the radar.
Well, yeah, I mean, Mr. Chair, move on to the weight limits.
I just want to make one comment here on the terms of the multimodal, multi-jurisdictional SPLOS on that transportation subcommittee. That'd be huge for our rural counties to look at that in terms of that committee, to make it known to the Georgia delegation that would be a huge benefit for the local counties to kind of come together county by county or region by region to create that in your own jurisdiction, to specialize or customize a program that fits your specific needs so that you can get the dollars to do resurfacing, safety projects, whatever project you need in your specific multi-jurisdictional area. So it would be huge to have that conversation, those of you on this critical transportation infrastructure subcommittee. So I want to just put that on the table so you can be aware how important this is to all of us in the entire state of Georgia in all 159 counties. We've got to find ways to get funding to those smaller units so they can take care of their roads and resurfacing and safety projects as well, okay? Thank you.
If I could, we're talking about multi-jurisdictional. What about just a single Kelly SPLOS?
That'll be on the table as well and be looked at. We'll go a lot deeper into the study committee on some of the issues as we have more data from them to see what's kind of palatable. But these are some of the big ones that I know have been discussed over the last couple of years off and on independently. So we know they'll definitely be at the table and want to bring that to your attention. But there are some other things we'll want to look at that get into the weeds a little bit more pertaining to just a regular SPLOS, whether it's a statewide penny or whether there's some things on the local level that we can do for transportation. Local excise tax and motor fuel being one of them, but maybe going beyond motor fuel and looking at other options. There's definitely some things there that we'll have that conversation about. All right, if no more questions on that, I'm going to move on to weight limit increases on trucks. As I mentioned briefly, we had two bills after the session last year, or towards the end of the session, that were introduced. I noticed Commissioner Farrell here, so I'm going to speak to the port proximate one and wouldn't mind a couple of comments from you when I get done and give you a chance to kind of think about it since I didn't ask you in advance. But the port proximate bill was House Bill 1100. And I know this is something that the ports is very interested in, and this is specific to moving cargo to and from a deep water port facility, or the other key here is a intermodal facility. Cordele, my understanding, the dry port there would be considered an intermodal facility in the state. So if you're around Cordele, the way this bill is, it'd be a 20-mile radius from there, as well as the Port of Savannah and the Port of Brunswick. I know the ports are looking at adding intermodal facilities throughout the state. So even if you're from North Georgia and you're thinking, oh, well, I don't have to worry about that very much. Well, they may drop an intermodal facility in North Georgia at some point in time. And if they do that, now the 20-mile radius will impact you there as well. So even though this is a port proximate bill and a request for truck weight increases from a port proximate standpoint, I just want to make sure that it's on the radar that this still could have statewide impact depending on where these intermodal facilities are and just what that radius ends up being. If it's 20 miles today, will it stay 20 miles, or in 2 years will they want 50 or will they want 100? So what they sought to do with this is if you could get a special permit from GDOT. It was an annual permit, the way this bill is written, of $500 a year for the truck's ability to increase to 105,000 pounds. I believe right now there's already a permit there that's for 97 or 97.5, if I'm correct. And so this would be another 7,000 or so to bring them up to 105,000. With the idea being that some of our surrounding states have this option already, and so they're having to go into South Carolina or Florida or what have you and unload and come in. And so that's what House Bill 1100 did, and I know the ports are behind it. And at that point, Commissioner Farrell, if you have anything you want to add to that or explain the importance of it or what the potential impact could be down there, it'd be great.
Well, the weight limit increase is kind of
Well, and I will say that's the impetus behind the bill, as well as the growth that they anticipate from the ports. They'll tell you they'll take trucks off the road, but in reality, they're just hoping to be able to create space for more trucks as they need it.
Shaun, let me mention something about that. One thing to keep in mind, and I'm not advocating for or against it. I don't have a dog necessarily in the fight, but one reason why there's a problem with the money in transportation is cars don't use as much fuel as they used to use. Well, the reason that is there are lighter materials, and a lot of people are driving smaller cars because gas costs a lot of money. So the thing to think about is a 105,000-pound truck running into a 3,000-pound car on your road. Let's don't forget the safety side of the deal on it. So like I said, I'm not for or against. I'm not trying to argue for or against. I'm just saying that there is some physics involved that you can't change when a 105,000-pound truck runs into a 3,000-pound car. So there's more of those on the road. I guarantee you there's more in these cities, especially the more congested your city, there are probably more small cars there. I know where I come from, everybody drives a pickup truck. But every time you want to go to a larger city, people are driving smaller cars, so that's something to keep in mind.
And that is historically, and if Todd wants to correct me if I'm wrong, because I know he's been involved in that fight with my predecessor, Matt Hicks, whenever they were here. But historically, our position on it has really focused on the additional maintenance requirements on the roads and the safety aspect of that from local government perspective. And is that accurate? Is there? So we do have a position statement in the platform that deals with the truck weight issue, and it does focus on those two pieces. What I would say with the two bills, and I'll briefly touch on House Bill 1087 because that was broader. As I mentioned, the representative there is a logger by trade. And so he's got a couple of pieces in his bill. One, it still requires a permit, but it just says a $200 permit. It doesn't say it's an annual permit. So it could be, it sounds like it's a one-time $200 permit. If you have it, you can increase the weight limit to 89.5. And it's for, you can see the back side of that transportation paper has truck weight increases, and it tells you all the products that can be hauled from it. The other piece of what it does, it eliminates the axle limit. So right now there's a 23,000 pound axle limit and a 46,000 pound on tandem axle. This bill eliminates those requirements, and the reason behind it and why I think it's important to know that he's a logger by trade is the way the loggers load the logs, there's the weight's disproportionate on the tractor trailer. And so therefore what can happen oftentimes is they'll be overweight on the axle but not overweight on the overall 85,000 pounds. And so they're trying to seek a way to do that. I'm not an engineer, so I obviously don't know the impact of being okay with being that 25,000 pounds on a single axle, but still staying at 80,000 pounds in the overall, where that impact would be. My guess is it might harm bridges more so than it would roads from that standpoint. I think that's where we'd want to have engineers in here. And I know Russell from GDOT, their chief engineer, he spoke to the committee on this issue and the impact it would have on roads. And we anticipate inviting him to be a part of our study committee as well, so we can have that expertise. And we'll reach out to some of your county GDOT and public works folks to have them on there so we can know as well. Todd, do you want to make a quick add?
I'm just saying